I am thrilled to be able to introduce our moderator, or I will say our two panelists on this discussion. There are no better advocates or individuals to talk about international trade and what is going on in this area than Caroline Beteta, the president and CEO of Visit California. Caroline, will you join me on stage while I do your introduction, please? Caroline is the president and CEO of Visit California, which is essentially California's marketing agency to the rest of the world. She has 18,000 investors on behalf of who she serves, and she goes out and basically sells the California brand, the California culture, the California dream. What her team and Caroline do is quite amazing. She serves as vice chair of the U.S. Travel Association and as a member of the executive committee of the World Travel and Tourism Council. She has received a number of awards for her creative work and her leadership, and we are so thrilled to have Caroline as one of our partners for this event, but also of the moderator of this panel. Welcome, Caroline. Good to see you. Now, I would also like to welcome to the stage another amazing participant for this discussion. She really needs no introduction. It is the 50th Lieutenant Governor of California, Eleni Kounalakis, the first female Lieutenant Governor as well. We're thrilled to have her. As she joins the stage, I'm going to just reference some of her accomplishments as well. Prior to serving as Lieutenant Governor, she led one of the most successful, I was going to say a lot of different adjectives for it, but successful development companies here in California. And then prior to that, she was serving as ambassador to Hungary under President Obama. She also, under President Brown, was the chair of California's Advisory Council for International Trade. And now in her current role as Lieutenant Governor, she also serves as the representative for international affairs and trade development for the governor. We are thrilled to have both of you here to talk about this discussion. I'll hand it over to Caroline. Thank you.
I think the Lieutenant Governor will agree. Thank you for those kind introductions, Jennifer. And I think from both of us, thank you for all the work you're doing and the inspiration of bringing together the business community in California. So important to have people at the table, not just out in the operations. So, and Marianne, thank you for stepping up to that high-paying job as chair. You know, leadership is hard, and we're all appreciative. So, with that, okay, I have one small story to tell so the audience understands us and our chemistry before we get into questions. How's that? So we looked at the timing and said 45 minutes. Okay, we can do this. The Lieutenant Governor and I spent 3 hours at midnight talking, waiting for a flight in India one time. So I think we can.
We never run out of things to talk about, Caroline.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I hope you'll find it interesting too. We're definitely going to cover the topics of the day. So why don't we just start in, and I'll start with you. And the first question, congratulations for, I mean, incredible work and leadership on the international trade front. It's just been amazing. I love working with you on your international council and other members of the cabinet, and achieving this new milestone, being the fourth largest economy, if California were an independent nation. No small feat at all. So given that new status, what role has international trade played in allowing California to become so economically successful? I really see you as having been at the helm for all of us in this leadership role.
Well, Caroline, thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. Here she is. Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction and for bringing us all together. And I'd also like to just recognize your team, and in particular, the incredible Suzanne Sterling, who most of us know, and her incredible leadership in international engagement. And on my team, Evan Reed, who served for 27 years at the U.S. Department of State, and many of you in the Consular Corps know Evan on my team. And I also want to thank all of the sponsors, and of course, the members of the Consular Corps, Consuls General, Excellencies, thank you for coming up and being here with us in Sacramento. You know, Caroline, I was trying to explain the other day to someone what you did, and I put it in the context of this thing now you're hearing kind of wall to wall, which is California has now surpassed Japan to become the fourth largest economy in the world if we were a country, which of course we are not a country. I am not for that, for the record, by the way. Tempting though it may be to talk about. But if we were a country, Caroline Beteta would be the Secretary of Tourism. And nobody does more than you do. And so our collaboration and partnership now over the last 7 years has been so fruitful. It's involved a lot of you, a lot of your countries, a lot of your companies in our trade missions to India, as you mentioned, to Mexico, to Japan. And it's just been so great. So my understanding is this 45 minutes is a back and forth. You're going to ask me some questions, but I got to ask you some as well.
Absolutely.
All right. So the first question just about the California economy and how integrated we are into the world. Well, it goes without saying. If you look geographically, we're about 500 miles of coastline on the Pacific Rim. We don't always think of the United States as a Pacific Rim nation, but we most certainly are. And over the years, certainly starting in the 90s with liberalization of trade policy, NAFTA, and then later with most favored nation status for China, the California economy has absolutely disproportionately benefited economically from those changes when it comes to trade. 40% of all the containerized shipping into the United States comes through the port of Long Beach in LA, the largest port complex in the country. We are number one in manufacturing. We are number one in agriculture. We are number one in access to capital, in the number of patents that are issued, the new business starts. All of these things come from our geographic location and the way the United States has had this approach to international trade over the last 30, 35 years. I think the example that I always use, and I tell you in 7 years it has not gotten old, is my Port Hueneme example. So most people know Long Beach, LA. They may know Alameda. Not everybody knows about the Port of Hueneme. It's a relatively small port compared to Long Beach and LA, just further north. Every year, 5 billion bananas goes through the Port of Hueneme for processing. That's 15 bananas for every man, woman, and child in the United States. People they see their bananas in the grocery store. They don't really visibly see what it takes to process just that one product. But when you think in those terms, you think about the logistics, the transportation, everything that goes into just getting that one product on the shelves for people. And then you multiply that, not just by things that we import that go directly to the shelves, whether it's clothes or toys, but the back and forth of electronics, of the automotive industry, it is just incredible. And so the other thing I always recommend, and maybe because I live on a Southwest flight between Sacramento and Los Angeles and back again, but you just look down, particularly when you're going into Southern California, and you can see, it's visible from the sky, the entry of goods in and out of the ports, across LA into the Inland Empire, the warehousing, the manufacturing, the industry. All of this is just sort of lit up. And when we look at the numbers behind it, we're 40 million people, again, an economy a little bit bigger than India, right? And about 20% of the jobs in this state are linked to trade. So we are deeply impacted. You know what? Okay, so the question was, how is California integrated and impacted? There is one other thing, and that is the makeup of our people. Because all of this vibrancy leads to California being a beacon for immigration. We've heard these statistics about the growing number of new businesses in the country that are founded by immigrants to the United States. The national average of immigration, we're about 14% immigrants in the United States. California is 27%. And our attitudes here are not xenophobic, a good Greek word, right?
I love it.
We are not xenophobic. And again, I think that probably the members of the international community who are here, you sense it. This openness of society, this welcoming, this idea that you see someone walking down the street and you cannot know who they are or what their life is like just by looking at them. You have to talk to each other. And this feeling that, when you have an economy, as we do, that last year outperformed the nation as a whole in terms of economic growth, people are too busy running their businesses, following their dreams, seeking their ambitions, to be dragged down into bitterness and the kind of toxicity that unfortunately we're seeing. So we are extremely connected to the international community, and frankly, I think that is an extraordinary, wonderful thing for the state of California. And I will say that also recognizing that it's not perfect, it's always a work in progress. And so in this big debate that's happening around globalization, we are both obligated to recognize the benefits, as we are also obligated to understand that there are things that we need to address. Now I got to ask you a question.
Oh, boy.
All right?
Uh-oh.
Caroline Beteta, would-be Secretary of Tourism for the country of California if we were one. So, one of California's major exports, I think it's the number one export because we categorize it as an export of services. I think I learned that from you actually 7 years ago, is tourism. So can you tell us and everyone here about the value of international travelers to California?
Absolutely, and so impressed. I think that was midnight again, waiting for that flight. Your retention's amazing. So international travelers probably wondering why I'm here. First of all, I want to recognize a couple of people I see in the audience to put a face to tourism. How many people are kind of in the tourism hospitality sector directly? Oh, wow, there's a few of us. Okay. So I see my first elected board chair, Seema Patel, out there, who's on the board of the chamber now. Yay. Ted Balistreri, 25 years plus, we'll just say plus Ted, as one of our first commissioners. So I'm seeing John Erdy, President and CEO of Mammoth Lakes, and others. So it's important to put a face to it. I was in a board meeting yesterday in San Francisco, and at the end of the board meeting, I mentioned I was going to be here today, and was encouraged. And there was about 250 people in the room. A lot of tourism executives come to our board meetings to hear what we're doing next. And I mentioned this very important milestone event here in Sacramento, and encourage the tourism industry executives to get involved with the chamber, because we're very much an economic development engine, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So back to the Lieutenant Governor's question. First and foremost, we're about a $157 billion economy. Visitors spend $157 billion in this state every year. It means that us as Californians get kind of a tax credit, or it's equal to $921 that we're not paying, because they're generating almost $13 billion a year in direct local and state taxes through like sales tax revenue, as well as transit occupancy tax, which powers a lot of communities. So as you were saying, you were flying over the states in Southwest, of course you're looking at goods movement and logistics. And when I'm doing it, I'm like, oh, there's that community and here's this community. So it's funny, our lenses. So international, as the Lieutenant Governor said, of that piece of the pie, international travelers spend $24 billion a year here. And it's so important. Now, it sounds like a small piece, but they stay longer, they spend more, they travel during off-peak shoulder seasons, midweek, and it's particularly important to many of our gateway communities, as well as many of our, great world-class destinations, just like Mammoth Lakes come from all over the world. Mammoth is a gateway to Yosemite, the national parks. And so for the rest that aren't in the industry, you're kind of going, so, okay, that's great, but I'm not in that industry. Well, as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned, actually tourism is California's largest service exporter. And the reason why it's categorized as a service exporter is because foreign visitors come into the state with their foreign currency, and they receive the service of a great experience, whether that's for business or leisure, and then they go home. So foreign service, that currency comes in and then it leaves. And so it is categorized by the federal government as a service export. And just to put a finer point on that, a couple metaphors that you're familiar with, and that is, we'll just talk about Canada and Mexico. California, as many of you know, produces 90% of the nation's citrus, but it would take exporting over 2,000 pounds of our premium citrus to match the economic impact of one visitor from Canada. So yeah, it's just dollars. It's all dollars, whether you're talking about imports, exports, it's all dollars. And then finally, if we compare it to, is anybody producing almonds in the audience? But if we're comparing almonds, one air traveler from Mexico would be the equivalent of the economic value of exporting 732 pounds of almonds to Mexico. Air travelers from Mexico are some of our highest per capita travelers.
That is really remarkable. That's really remarkable.
We're part of this community.
As you were talking, I was also thinking about what we went through during COVID. Maybe you can just kind of roll into my next question for you, which is there's a lot happening right now. I'll talk about the tariff stuff, okay. But since we're on this thread, you can talk a little bit about what's happening right now, because the visitor from Canada, the visitor from Mexico, visitors from Asia, Europe. I have a godson who's visiting right now, and he flew out from Europe and said the whole airplane was empty. So maybe you could give us a little bit of a sense of, with the current administration, what you're experiencing and what California is going to need to do, or what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just start with the first part, like the impacts, and then it'll be interesting to jump back to you on the impacts on the trade front that are very clear. So interestingly, in 25 years, when we report economic statistics, we're usually doing it a year in arrears because we wait for the traveler to happen and then we report. The volatility in our environment is so pronounced right now that we actually were but needed to report on forecasts for 2025 for the industry. They kind of just, it's a storm. Where are we? How are we navigating this? And so while the tourism economy, as a point of perspective, grew marginally about 3% from 2023 to 2024, in March at our annual forum, we reported out a number, and in just the last 3 weeks or so, we've had to downgrade that by about 7% from last year in terms of visitation going down. It'll pop up about 0.5% in our forecast for spending, but that's because of inflationary pressures. So basically, we're flat. We've never had a situation like that ever except for the pandemic. And I think what the Lieutenant Governor was alluding to, just as, again, another point of perspective, the pandemic was massive for us. The other huge milestone was 9/11, of course, where, we had a 50% overnight drop-off in visitors because of the pandemic. And 9/11 actually was epic as well. Both periods seeing unemployment for the travel and hospitality industry greater than the Great Depression, because it just focused so much on travel and hospitality. I know it focused on everything else, but I think we can all go back and realize, travel and hospitality was shut down during those two periods. So this period is interesting. It's very volatile. I can speak toward economic, and this is kind of how we divide this, is economic and then sentiment. So economic, we have this situation of the strength of the dollar that is enormous globally in most cases. And as a matter of fact, our economic research firm just came out with kind of perspective averaging across all of our major markets that, the buying power of the dollar is 29% more than, those markets, or 29% weaker. Let's just take Canada, for example, major market for us. Canadians spend $4 billion a year in the state, massive economic benefit. And the dollar is about 25%, 26, sometimes 27% weaker. And there's this psychological threshold when you get to 25%, because travel is discretionary, that they go, my dollar can go further somewhere else. So that's part of it. And then we have the sentiment piece on top of it, hearing about the 51st state constantly has not been a good diplomatic strategy, we'll say. And it's caused massive shifts in sentiment in Canada alone. We're seeing softening because of the weakness of the dollar and sentiment across Western Europe. So that is an issue. And, it kind of starts with tariffs, and then you get this combination effect of dollar and sentiment. And then we do have one green spot, and that is India. We're looking at about a 3% growth for India. I will attribute the investment of this travel industry because, for those that don't know, we're actually modeled after the Agricultural Commodity Boards. We're a 501c6, but we also have a dotted line and relationship into the governor's office. I sit on the Lieutenant Governor's International Council, for example. And that piece is super important. We've invested in that market for 10 years, and now, while others are fledging our competitive set, that being Florida, Hawaii, and then countries around the world, we're actually growing, and it certainly helps to have a high-profile board member like Seema Patel. That makes a difference, but also that middle class is doubling from 200 million to 400 million, which is astounding. That's the size of our entire population here in the U.S. So we have efficiencies in air travel, and so we're seeing more and more nonstop flights. So that bodes well for us.
Can you compare that to what's happened with visitors from China, from in the curve before the pandemic to today? Because there was a point where you talked about 4 billion Canadians are spend here, but China, what was the peak of spending from tourism from China, and how has that changed over the last few years?
Yeah, that also has dramatically dropped off, to your point. So China was our biggest international market, and And when we look at Canada and Mexico, they're not overseas markets, they're still foreign markets. So there is the advantage of being of proximity. So we kind of put them in a different class than the overseas where you have to take a plane, you can't swim to get here, or a car. So we classified a little different. But so China was massive. I mean, it was bigger than all of our markets combined. They were spending about $3.8 billion. And before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and that market just fell off a cliff, like others. But we were hoping and expecting it to come back quickly, and the dependency there is lift. We lost 66% of our lift, 2/3 of the lift, and that affects all of you.
You mean airplanes?
Yes, airplanes, and so that affects that. Lift is lift for business, trade. You still need seat capacity and airplanes coming in. And what's happened is when the pandemic lifted, it didn't just come back because it's very complicated to award routes, and it actually has a dependency on the U.S. Department of Transportation even, awarding routes one at a time. So we were cheering just in the last few weeks because the lift increased 10%. Now, again, the pandemic was a long time ago, but last year it increased 10%. We're like, finally, the Chinese want to come here so much that they're actually taking alternative routes through Japan, the Middle East, India, just to get to California. So the demand is there. That's, and you talked about it. I think it starts with culture and our welcoming environment. That's what aligns us. So it's coming back slowly, but we're also looking at India now as that mega market. So let's go to you and tariffs. My goodness. Thank you. This is an amazing time, challenging for you 24/7. Tell us about the environment.
I was preparing this morning as I was driving up from San Francisco, and I was reading some of the different articles to get up on the latest, literally like the last few days, tariffs and aluminum tariffs, right? Steel and aluminum tariffs. But I read something that really resonated to me. Gene Shiraka from the Port of LA, he said, even for the most seasoned people who are engaged in the trade industry, keeping up with what is going on is next to impossible. I was trying to chart kind of it was 25% tariffs levied against Canada and Mexico. They went away entirely, but 10% stayed on everything else. But wine is still 25%. It is a whipsaw. And I want to just start by acknowledging that kind of climate, that kind of uncertainty is just a killer for business. If you can't predict from one day to the next what your costs are going to be, you have to figure out another plan if you're going to keep your business going. In California, for our exporters, something like 96% of the companies in California that exports into foreign markets are small and medium-sized businesses. Around the world, people who are looking for California products, if it is not reliable, if the price is not reliable, but even worse in the case of wine with Canada, 95% of U.S. wine exports are California wine, and our biggest market is Canada. And so, along with the incredibly humiliating, insulting language that they're using, they're also driving the prices up, the cost up. Not only does this impact the moment in terms of wine exports, but people start looking for alternative places to source their wine. Number one, just start building relationships with Australia, right? Or other parts of the world that are producing wine, who would love to take the place of the California wine industry. but then also people start thinking, well, maybe I'll, and there's the whole beverage industry is changing so quickly. People will think, well, maybe we'll just start promoting, hard cider or some other choice instead of wine. The wine industry is really important to California. All of our industries are important, but, it's the layers of it, the lack of certainty, the tariffs in place where they are that drive up prices of our exports, make it harder to export our goods, drive up prices of imports, the changes of supply chains, and underneath it all is this sort of simmering feeling that, and I'm a former diplomat. Nothing pains me more than to criticize my own country in front of our foreign partners. But we've never had a president of the United States who's been driven by revenge to us, to our own people. It is a difficult environment. And we don't know from day to day where it's going to go, and we don't know from month to month, and we certainly don't know year to year, but we do know that this uncertainty and the wielding of tariffs as international diplomacy it appears to be here to stay. And in all, we are going to have to do what we can to help California products find the markets, adjust where we can. And we're also, on a domestic side, going to have to prepare for an increase in prices, which has already started to happen.
Fascinating. So you talked generally, I'm sure and I think we're seeing it play out short-term and long-term steps to try to ameliorate or mitigate some of these situations, some of the tactics. And I know this is where you're spending a lot of time. Is there any market-specific tactics on some of these areas?
Well, the first thing we're doing, you might have seen that California filed a lawsuit. We're really feel very strongly that this case has a lot of merit. Remember back the first tariffs war, it was done differently. And a lot of, Lighthizer was kind of the architect of it, and there was always, for every tariff, there was a trade violation, which was underpinning the use of tariffs, right? Now, even we in California recognize, particularly with China, there were all kinds of trade violations, but that gave the White House the authority to use tariffs in response to those trade violations. What did he call it? The Tariff Day, Liberation Day, or some such thing, right? When he just started randomly putting tariffs with absolutely no justification on countries around the world, putting them out one day, pausing them the next day, all of this, it is not, in our belief and the Attorney General's analysis, legal for a White House to arbitrarily impose tariffs. In fact, that authority belongs to the Congress. So this is making its way through the courts. So far, in a lot of different things, the courts appear to be probably the best place where we're seeing the strength of democratic institutions during this uncertain time. And 2 days ago, Monday, the court was going to move the case into the trade courts, and we said, no, we would rather have you dismiss it so we can appeal. So that's the status of this case. It was dismissed, but that was actually what the Attorney General was going for. In order that we can appeal it, we're going to appeal it to the Ninth Circuit, which is absolutely unencumbered by, political kind of pressure. They will have I think a pure legal analysis of this, and we feel very confident that the law is on our side. So this is important, because if we win, and by the way, then it would, I imagine, get appealed to the Supreme Court. Hard to say, but we do know that Congress is the one who has the ultimate jurisdiction here. So we're feeling like that's a very important venue. It might actually give us some relief, and it might help to stabilize the situation, which is absolutely, per my previous conversations, what we need. And in the meantime, I'll take this opportunity. Is Canada in the House, by the way? There we are. Mr. Consul, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. We love Canada. Please remind your friends that any product with the California stamp on it is going to be great quality and absolutely wonderful. And please spread the word. You guys don't have a beef with us. And really for all of you, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about what you guys are doing over there. But we hope that, and the governor came out very clearly months ago, that the relationships that we have, which are built on friendship and trust and person-to-person relationships underpinned by shared values, we hope that will be kept in mind in this trying situation. But we also know that we are a subnational government, and we both benefit by trade policies when they are favorable, and we are significantly challenged during times like this, as we are. And now
before you ask me that question, it was interesting, the litigation process.
Yeah.
And it was triggered in me when you said, and then we'll go to the Supreme Court. So what is the timeline, maybe, to get some relief? I didn't think about it in terms of timing. I knew you were in the fight, but didn't think about the timing.
Look, we're not even 6 months in to this administration.
Okay.
So
that's what I was thinking the court timing is not.
I'm just saying they are moving at lightning speed, and even if courts move quickly, it takes time.
Okay.
But again, I'm hopeful about this. We will see where it goes, how long it takes. And in the meantime, we are absolutely hoping that we can rely on goodwill in the interim to the degree that we can. And
Excellent.
Now what are you doing, Caroline?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Canada. If we have an extra seat, why don't you come up to the front tonight at dinner? Okay, come see me. Canada, we'll start there. That is really kind of the tip of the spear of where this all started, and I say it wholeheartedly. I'm hybrid.
You have an ad campaign.
I do.
Tell us about
I
this.
do,
This is great.
and I mean, the strategy leading into it for me is as interesting as the ad campaign or the parallel strategy of earned media. But again, when the rhetoric came out of the White House, we felt it immediately. Canadian, and again, there was the economic psychological threshold. So with 2 hits, it's really easy to take a hard pass on California at that point, even though we have so much synergy and shared culture and history, including myself. I'm hybrid. I call myself. I'm first-generation American of Canadian descent. Lots of relatives on the East Coast. Spent a lot of time there. I'm you. And spent a lot of time also in the Vancouver, Victoria area with basically a second home. So it's just, it hurt really hard personally and professionally. I've never had that nexus in my career. And we feel so close to the Canadians. We do have Canadian operations. We spend about $5 million a year in direct-to-brand consumer advertising. And while we were seeing the softness immediately, as compared to, the other country, I will say with our brand and our inclusivity, All Dreams Welcome, we do sit apart. And our branding throughout the world lifts all of us in the room to amplify the authenticity of this incredibly diverse, inclusive culture. We all win by that. But it wasn't enough this time. We needed to go direct. This is just a couple months ago. And so we decided to add a diplomatic layer onto this campaign. And then I just felt like we needed something more than just a narrative. There had to be action. So we immediately picked up the phone. We have a great partnership with Expedia and said, can you do something? Can we work with you to get the industry to come to the table to offer at least 25% discounts for hotels and attractions? And this has never been done. I'm just like, we can't just go out with a diplomatic layer. That's just air. We've got to mean it by having action, and it's been a phenomenal success. We have over 1,200 hotels and counting attractions that are providing 25% discounts, and Expedia says it's one of the most significant programs they've launched. They can't believe the traction. We can't believe the traction. I just wanted action behind the words. And people are actually using the site, booking hotels. It's working because we're sensitive to the economic piece. So there's that side. As we looked at how we were going to launch it, there was a full media blackout or blackballing of not only California interests, but U.S. We couldn't break through. We've never seen it before. I'm staring at Ryan Becker, our Senior VP of Communications and Strategy, and Angie, who's our Vice President of Comms, that we just sat and huddled with, like, how are we going to break through? And we both said, it was kind of simultaneous as we said, let's reach out to the governor, and the governor was reaching out to us and said, happy to help. And we're like, okay, let's try it. And he launched the campaign layer for us, and it shattered. I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. We had 500 pickups of national and local media across the country. Like, he broke through, launched the campaign, which is called California Loves Canada.
Isn't that fantastic? Of course it broke through. Like, why be subtle? We love Canada.
We do. I'll show you our campaign on the phone later.
By the way, we love Europe too.
Yes. Yeah. We love you all. That's why we have this forum here. Yeah, we love. Look at us. They're going to have pictures of us going, we love you all. But I mean, it was just amazing. And frankly, right before that, I couldn't even get an interview. And so he opened the dam for us. I did multiple interviews after that as well to continue on the pickup. But the idea, I think, is very heartening. And that is, we Californians wouldn't be California, I'm staring at our Canadian friend over there, without Canada. Like, for example, did you know where the California roll sushi was invented? By a chef in British Columbia. That's where it was invented, for example. Wow. IMAX, Canadian. Hotel del Coronado, designed by a Canadian. Walt Disney Hall.
This is like the best day ever, right?
I know. Right? Designed by a Canadian.
But Caroline, isn't that true across the board? Can't we be, every time I have the opportunity to go and speak at one of the national days or one of the events that is being hosted by, you have dignitaries here and you graciously invite me or Evan or Emily Desai or Dee Dee Myers. We get this list of exports, imports, foreign direct investment, and people-to-people relations. Every single country California has these kinds of statistics with. And we're so fortunate for this. And I think that, I just loved this California Loves Canada. Just cut to the chase, get out there, and try to dial up and amplify California values, our incredible tourist locations, whether it's Disneyland or driverless vehicles in San Francisco or Yosemite or surfing the beaches, Hollywood, all of that. It really is incumbent on us to both amplify what's here, but also how incredibly welcome we hope that the world feels that they are to California.
Absolutely, and it just triggered like all the international trade missions we've done together. We sit together. When we go overseas, we are one voice, we're one brand, we are one experience, because driven by our cultural attributes and what makes us and has built this fourth largest economy in the world. So whenever we're leading in a country with a new campaign launch, I'm thinking about this entire room. And by the way, can the consuls, or if you're coming out of a consul, can you raise your hand? I know it's most of you, but I just want to see the hands. Look at it, like they took the time to come in here, despite the fact that we're fighting it too. And we thank you for your time and your interest to hear, our different take on how we view the world, and our success is because of the relationship we have with all of you.
Give yourself a hand.
Yeah.
All right.
Not me, I'm clapping for them.
All right. I think we've gotten through everything. I know it's an exciting day. Carol and I are going to be around. All the representatives of the chamber are here. I will, since we have a couple of minutes left, I hope you all are planning to stay for dinner. I got a call from Jennifer a couple weeks ago, and she said, we're doing all these different things, and we thought it would be fun to have a candidate forum of everybody running for governor on Wednesday night. And I said, Jennifer, that will absolutely be so much fun for you. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of what that's going to be like, there are quite a few. I think there are 7 people, including myself, who've announced we have a primary in 1 year. 1 year, almost like from yesterday. We will very possibly, we'll certainly know the top 2. So for tonight, I think that there are 7 Democrats who are coming, and then there are two Republican candidates. I've never met either of them. So it's going to be quite an interesting conversation. We're going to be talking about the California economy, and frankly, I think, Jennifer, you set that up pretty well, and it's going to be very interesting, and probably a lot of fun for all of you. So I hope you are there. And
we need to thank you for all the work you've done on the trade front and as a leader, and thank you for staying in the public space on behalf of all of California industry. I mean, you've just been amazing.
All right, then one more thank you to all of the companies in the state of California who create the jobs, who persevere, who deliver not just jobs and economic development, but also tax dollars to this state to keep it running, to everyone in the tourism industry who contributes, voluntarily to the campaigns that you do around the world. I'm a former business person, and not a day goes by when I don't think about the importance of industry in our state for us being who we are. And so if anybody, and I'm talking to the business people here for one moment, mentions the size of the California economy and does not in the same breath recognize the people and the companies that make us the 4th largest economy, call them on it. And I will too. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you tonight.